I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was sipping my morning coffee, reviewing the previous night's incident reports, when my lieutenant called me into his office. I noticed the serious look on his face, and my first thought was, what now? As I entered the office, I saw a TV screen on his desk, frozen on a paused video. The image showed a patrol car, its lights flashing, and an officer standing beside it. I recognized the officer as mine, but something didn't feel right. My lieutenant gestured for me to sit down, and I did, my eyes fixed on the screen. He hit play, and the video started rolling. At first, it was just a routine traffic stop, the officer approaching the vehicle, asking for license and registration. But then, things took a turn. The driver, a young woman, got out of the car, and the officer's demeanor changed. He became agitated, and I could sense the tension escalating. My gut told me this wasn't going to end well. As I watched, the officer's words became more aggressive, his body language more confrontational. The woman, seemingly frightened, took a step back, and that's when the officer drew his gun. I felt a knot in my stomach, thinking, no, this can't be happening. The video froze again, and I looked up at my lieutenant, my mind racing. I knew that officer, we'd worked together for years. What possessed him to act like that? The silence in the room was oppressive, and I could smell the stale coffee and worn leather of the office chairs. My lieutenant's eyes met mine, and I knew we both were thinking the same thing: this video was going to change everything. The department's reputation, the officer's career, and the public's trust, all would be affected by what I just witnessed. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the long, difficult road ahead. I decided to get to the bottom of this, to find out what drove that officer to behave so recklessly. As I stood up to leave, I knew that my role in this story was just beginning. I remember the call like it was yesterday. Domestic disturbance, possible 10 to 96, that's police speak for a mentally unstable person, at 1456 Oak Street. My first thought was, not another one. I'd been on the force long enough to know that domestics can go sideways fast. As I rolled up to the scene, I noticed the house was dark, except for the faint light of a TV flickering through the curtains. I approached the residence with caution, my hand resting on my Sig Sauer. My partner, Rachel, covered the back door. I could hear muffled voices, but nothing that suggested an immediate threat. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I've seen my fair share of domestics, but you never know what you're walking into. As I entered the house, I was hit with the smell of stale cigarettes and last night's Chinese takeout. The air was thick with tension. A disheveled woman, late 30s, sat on the couch, her eyes sunken, her face puffy from crying. A young man, early 20s, paced back and forth in front of her, his eyes wild, his words slurred. I noticed the broken picture frame on the coffee table, the shattered remains of what looked like a family portrait. My first priority was to separate them, get them to calm down. I gently coaxed the woman into the kitchen, leaving Rachel to handle the young man. As we stepped into the kitchen, I asked her what happened. Her words spilled out in a jumbled mix of fear and desperation. I listened intently, my mind racing with possibilities. Something didn't add up. The story didn't feel right. I decided to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the arrest. I remember the night like it was yesterday. My partner, Rachel, and I were patrolling the outskirts of town in our cruiser, the only sound being the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the radio. My first thought was that it was going to be a slow night, just a bunch of routine calls and maybe a few speeding tickets. As we turned a corner, I noticed a figure standing on the side of the road, waving us down. My instincts kicked in, and I hit the brakes, pulling over to investigate. The figure, a young woman, approached the car looking frantic. I could see the fear in her eyes, and my gut told me something was off. "I need your help," she said, her voice shaking. "They're watching me. They're going to hurt me." My training kicked in, and I went into assessment mode. I took in her appearance, disheveled clothes, no visible injuries, but a sense of desperation that was hard to ignore. I decided to take her statement, thinking maybe she was just a paranoid citizen, but as she started to talk, my radar started to ping. She spoke of a conspiracy, of people in high places watching her, of threats and intimidation. At first, I thought she was just another crackpot, but as she spoke, I noticed the conviction in her voice, the details she provided that seemed too specific to be made up. My mind started racing, thinking about the possibilities, the what-ifs. I glanced over at Rachel, who was listening intently, her expression unreadable. I made a split-second decision to take this woman's statements seriously, to investigate further. Little did I know, this was just the tip of the iceberg, and our quiet night was about to turn into a wild ride. I remember the feeling of unease as I pulled up to the municipal building in my patrol car. My first thought was, this is it. This is the moment of truth. I had been investigating allegations of corruption among local officials for months, and today was the day I would confront them. As I stepped out of the car, the bright sunlight reflected off the building's glass facade, but it did little to dispel the sense of foreboding that had been growing in my gut. I adjusted my duty belt, making sure my handcuffs and pepper spray were secure. I knew I was in for a fight. I noticed the mayor's assistant, a smug-looking man named Jerry, standing outside the entrance. He flashed a fake smile as I approached, but I saw the faintest glimmer of concern in his eyes. My internal monologue was racing. Stay calm, stay focused. Don't let them get under your skin. I decided to take a deep breath and push through the doors, my eyes scanning the lobby for any signs of trouble. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale coffee and worn carpet. I spotted the mayor himself, a portly man with a well-oiled comb-over, chatting with a group of city council members. I approached them calmly, my boots clicking on the tile floor. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice firm but measured, "I need to speak with you about some discrepancies in the city's financial records." The room fell silent, and I could feel the weight of their collective guilt settling in. I pulled out my notebook and began to recite the evidence I had uncovered, my eyes locked on the mayor's. I noticed the beads of sweat forming on his forehead, the faint tremble in his hand as he reached for his glass of water. I knew I had them right where I wanted them. I'll never forget the day I responded to the 911 call that would change everything. My radio crackled to life, dispatching me to a rural farmhouse on the outskirts of town. Possible hostage situation, the dispatcher's voice was laced with urgency. I hit the lights and sirens, my heart rate ticking up a notch. As I turned onto the dirt driveway, I noticed the air was heavy with an eerie silence.